Hello, everyone. My name is Kendra Seymour, and I want to welcome you back to another Change the Year Foundation interview. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Bridgit Danner. Welcome, Bridgit.
Hi, Kendra. Happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. Now, for those who don't know Bridgit yet, she has been a licensed acupuncturist since 2004 and is a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner since 2015. After losing everything to toxic mold, Bridgit now educates about toxins and how to detoxify with a functional healthcare approach through her online community at bridgitdanner.com. She's also the author of The Ultimate Toxic Mold Recovery Guide, Take Back Your Home, Health, and Life, available on Amazon, and the creator of a specialty supplement line, Functional Detox Products. Now, Bridgit, you and I both had our own experiences living in a water damaged building that has ultimately led us down our respective paths. But I know for me, prior to this experience, honestly, I never gave mold much thought beyond it's just an allergy. So, my first question to you is really, what are some of the different ways that mold can impact the body?
Yeah, so many ways. And I do think there's some mix ups. Like, it can be an allergy, and it doesn't have to be a toxic mold that you're allergic to. There's certain species of mold that will produce these toxic metabolites that have like their own special function or property. But yeah, there's a few things. And as I've interviewed some different building specialists, which you may be too, like I guess I learned as a practitioner or in going through it myself that it was just really the toxic molds that were bad for you. And I'll argue that I think those are the worst for you because of some of the things they can do to you that we can explain. But also just a load of mold in a water damaged home. And maybe there's also bacteria and candida. And then we have like off gassing, furniture and EMF. So it's kind of a air quality issue overall, and some people have airborne allergies to molds and other things, um, or they may develop some more sensitivity from being in that kind of environment. And then I believe like if you're in that environment long enough and there is toxic mold, um, I think almost anyone could develop symptoms. Like there's people who are hardier, so to speak, that that won't come on as fast or as strong. But if you're in a strong enough load overall, or just a strong enough load of toxins, eventually it's going to cause some kind of breakdown. So more the way, I think people think of it irritating like the respiratory tract, and that can be true. Um, but you're also breathing it in, and it's very potent, and it can basically like break down and go right into the brain, like through your nose into the center of your brain, which is where your hypothalamus is. And then it can cross like fatty cell membranes. It can be water soluble too, so it's a really good traveler. The toxins coming off molds are really good travelers, so they can infiltrate the brain, which is of course like the command center of the body, where we need what we need for thinking and gut motility and hormone control. And then we're also like ingesting some molds through our mouth, in our digestive tract, causing problems because our digestive tract is full of bugs and bacteria, and now there's this new influencer, and it can really disrupt the gut. So there's so many symptoms that can be related to mold, that aren't just kind of the things you think about, like a runny nose or something like that.
So, like, what are some of the most common symptoms you see in the patients that you work with?
Yeah, I say top two are fatigue and brain fog. Those are pretty much, I think, always the top two I see. And then there can be a lot of things, can be, and some people won't have it that at all. Like some people would have skin issues, and someone never does. Someone might gain weight, someone might lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
I think food sensitivities and digestive things are quite common to see. I think if you're dealing with like multiple food sensitivities and you're trying everything to eat perfectly and restore your gut, and it's still a real struggle, I think that's a time to think about mold. Mood issues, anxiety, poor sleep, hair loss we were talking about before we came on is even possible. I mean, some people get pretty severe loss of muscle control and nerve issues. Some people end up in like a wheelchair, unable to work from the neurological effects. So yeah, again, a wide range. For me, yeah, I'll just say some of mine that were early on that maybe I definitely had immune weakness, which I don't even think it's talked about quite enough in this community or space. So I was just getting colds like twice a month all
Mm.
winter long, like just constantly, getting chills, like having to take a hot bath like twice a day because I'd have chills so much. And I just don't feel like people talk about that kind of thing with mold much. Um, just chronic pain, like I had back pain, and it was always kind of dismissed as, oh, it's this or that, or you're stressed. And, you shouldn't be in chronic pain when you're, 35 years old. Um, and I'd say hormonal disruption was happening for me, which nobody attributed to mold. So again, I was like in my late 30s, but like having spotting in my menstrual cycle like every month. Um, and again, kind of no one's fault, but what happened to me may happen to a lot of people is like if they can't figure you out, they tell you you're stressed.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. I was told that. Oh, you're just a young mom. Right. Oh, you're getting older. That's normal. Is it?
Yeah, it's it's really frustrating. So I think the benefit of like you and I going through it is I can say from, my own experience, like, yes, like keep looking for answers. Like there is an answer for you out there.
Yeah, especially when you're doing the things, okay, I'm exercising, I'm trying to prioritize sleep, I'm trying to manage my stress and you're still not getting better, then maybe the problem is elsewhere. So one
Yeah.
of the things like, and I don't know if you experience this with your family, but we see it all the time, is that people in the same family have different symptoms. And sometimes that leads the more skeptical members of the family to be like, well, if it were mold, we would all be sick in the same way. But that's just not how mold works, right? So, why does it impact families and people in the same household differently?
Yeah, and just like I was saying earlier, there's just so many possibilities that, that's just one reason right there. And then, so based on, someone's genetics or age or health history, um, certain systems will be hit harder. Like I used to be an acupuncturist, and when people would get in a car accident, the injury would often kind of land where they already had an injury, right? Because it's a weak area. So the same can happen in the body. Yeah, and I think there's, it's not totally predictable. Like, but with kids, sometimes you're seeing more digestion issues, mood issues. There could be like a little bit of grouping, but again, it can really be all over the place. But there's a section of my book where I talk about like how it impacts the body systems, and not to say I'm ever like trying to convince anyone of anything, but if you just like understand the science of how these toxins can hit various systems, then any of the symptoms are possible. And probably everybody in the family has a few. I would even argue, does the healthiest one really not have any symptoms? Or are they going to be hit down the road? It can contribute to cancers down the road. So you might think, oh, this is nothing and whatever, but you don't know what's going on in your body that is getting set up for down the road.
Do you see that? Like, I know for me, it's easy for me to dismiss my own symptoms, but when it comes to my kids, I am very protective. I want to make sure they're healthy or whatever. Do you see mold impacting kids differently than adults? Are there common symptoms that tend to characterize children who are exposed to water damage buildings a little bit more?
I mean, I think I know some because we've seen some kids, but I wouldn't say we've seen a ton of kids. So again, I would say we see like a lot of digestive stuff, some behavioral, some respiratory. Again, the hair loss is something kind of new. That can affect children or adults, but just I'm hearing affecting kids. Like ADHD can be in there. Um, so yeah, and one of my mold remediator friends was saying that often like it's the babies are sick in the house, and that makes a family look into the house. And but she didn't exactly explain the symptoms the infants were having, but I thought that was interesting.
Sure. Now, one of the things, I swear, if you go to any of the mole groups online, it is 90% women. And so, is there a difference between how this impacts men and women? Are women just more apt to look into this, or I don't know if there's a difference there.
Yeah, I don't think there's more susceptibility in women. The only thing I when I thought about with this question is women are more likely to develop autoimmunity, and mold can help contribute towards autoimmunity. So I think if you're a woman with autoimmunity, it's good to maybe think, was this a root cause for me, perhaps? But yeah, I mean, I think women generally seek healthcare more. Again, they might be both living in the same house, and the male is like, it's fine, or I don't want to see any, but it doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't have anything. So, yeah, I don't know. I've never heard that there's more women than men. I think it's just more of like who's seeking care.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. And we sometimes see that too, where people either remediate a home or maybe they end up moving. And then all of a sudden, the person who didn't think they had any symptoms related to the home, all of a sudden GI issues get better, or they're less anxious or less depression. And then the light bulb kind of goes off. Oh, it was impacting me in a way, or maybe contributing to um, some of those health issues. So in your book, you have 3 steps. Can you highlight a bit about each step for us?
Yeah, it was interesting to or have to organize information because there's so much you can do. So first I say, start with this is talking about more about the body, not so much the home, but like just first get all your foundations in order, which, is hopefully pretty obviously like eating well, getting a good night's sleep, drinking water. But we all have our blind spots. So I think it's good to have that kind of checklist in there about things to do. I also included nature time or outdoor time. I think it's especially important when your indoor air quality isn't good, but outdoors also, calming, sunlight, all that. Avoiding other types of toxins is on my list, like plastics and fragrances. Resting, but also getting some movement. Even if you're really tired, you need some movement to pump lymph and blood in your body. Having healthy relationships, I think, is important. Having a support network. And I know some people may be going into this without the best network, but it just at least something to think about, even if like just your parents are willing to help you or support you, or if anybody's in your life who is really not supporting you in this, just know that's affecting you. And then I have staying aligned to your mission and your values, because as you go through this process, it can be very ungrounding and can be hard to remember, like, what is the most important thing for my family or my health. And let's see what else. And then like basic supplements. I think people tend to kind of skip into fancy detox supplements, but your cells need basic things to detox and to function. So you need fish oil, you need vitamin D, you need magnesium, you need a lot of B vitamins for your liver. So sometimes people kind of forget those basic things, and I think they're really important.
So if step 1 is kind of that master the foundations of good health, right? I think is what you call it in the book. And then, step 2, you're getting into some of those detox routines. And detox is a big word I think you see come up if you start looking into mold related illness. But what are some of the like mistakes then? It sounds like people forget about some of those basics that you just said, but what are some of the other detox mistakes you see people making?
Um, well, one, and I think practitioners can be guilty of this too, is you don't need to feel worse to feel better. It shouldn't be like, oh, I have this huge headache from my detox, but I'm just going to keep pushing through it. Sometimes we're going to hit that limit, and that's when we back off. if you're getting inflammatory symptoms from detoxifying, it means you're not keeping up with getting them out, and they're reflaming the body. So that one's a bad idea. I would say there's a myth to think you have to spend a lot of money, frankly. Like I see this in my Facebook group, like I think it's part of our culture that we sort of try to find the one guru, silver, silver coat MD who's gonna like fix everything, and I'm gonna get this IV therapy and then I'll be better. IV therapies and stuff can be really expensive, and don't think one is gonna get you better. So there's a lot of stuff you can do at a very low cost to get better. I mean, a lot of it is moving lymph and blood, and a lot of it can be really affordable, like drinking lemon water, just simple stuff. So I think in our urge to get better, we sometimes chase like something really expensive that seems really fancy and cutting edge. I mean, probably you and I both know, Kendra, like there's no like silver bullet or everyone will be doing it.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of chipping away at the things that seem to work for you and sticking with them. And there's a lot you can do at home with like dry brushing, jumping on a trampoline, taking an Epsom salt bath. Like these things are not expensive. You could even do breathing exercises. There's just so much. So, and you have to find what's right for you. So maybe that's a third myth is like, oh, if you do, this certain thing works for everybody. No, like some people can barely take a supplement. They're very sensitive, and they can still get better. And then some people can take handfuls of supplements, and then some people can't afford really many supplements. So I would say to people, like, don't be discouraged that there's no path for you based on your circumstances. It's just finding it, and if you can't afford all the things you want at once, it's pretty normal. Most of us can't afford all the things we want. So you just pick like, okay, now I'm going to try this. Okay, now I'm going to try this. And some of those things cost money. Some of them don't. But yeah, I do think that just a lot of the basic stuff, using a sauna, and you don't have to get an expensive sauna. You don't. You can. I know having like a $5,000 sauna is pretty sexy, but if you don't have the money and you don't have a clean house to put it in,
right,
just get like $100 tent sauna. It doesn't matter. People also get a little hung up on all those details, and it doesn't matter so much. It's just like getting into action in the right direction.
So it's almost like I think sometimes people hit that analysis paralysis too. Like,
yeah.
So many options, because we know there's not, sadly, one solution. It's not just one pill you can take. And so they just do nothing. But there really are these little things, it sounds like, that you can do that can start to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I love that message because it's financially, I mean, we're talking about treatment today. We're not talking about getting into a healthy environment or remediating your home. This whole process can be rather expensive. So it's nice to know that not all of these solutions have to break the bank.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have more on step 2 you want to talk about, or should we talk about step 3 where you target symptoms and system repair?
Yeah, it's up to you. I can give more examples of like things to do to detox, or
I would love that, please.
Okay. Yeah, I mentioned some of the techniques I like. Also, I did get into coffee enema while I was recovering. I know that's like a spicy topic. Not everyone's going to try it, which is fine. It's usually going to take you a few tries to get used to it. But I'm still doing it like 6 years later. So it shows that I like it. I think it's good. The science behind it is not the strongest, unfortunately. There isn't much out there. But I know for me and lots of my clients who frankly like were trying it on their own, like before we even met, they do get benefit from it. One thing it does is help recycle glutathione, which is going to get depleted from that long-term toxin exposure. So it's one of several important antioxidants. You can take glutathione as a supplement too. There gets to be a little argument about that as well, and analysis paralysis, but there are a lot of good brands and options out there. CoQ10 is another antioxidant I like that really helps for energy, which is mostly lacking for people. A really gentle thing I like is broccoli seed and sprout, and I've never seen a person have a side effect from it, and it's good for the liver, it's good for the immune system, it's good for removing other chemicals from your body. A binder people have probably heard of, and there's lots of options there. It's just sort of like a garbage man to help get things out of the body. And then electrolytes is something I encourage because you may be urinating more because of hormonal changes. Your body's definitely using up a lot of nutrients to detox, and then hopefully you're using a sauna. So there's a few reasons to just up your electrolyte hydration.
No, those are all really helpful. Now, do you have like, if I had said like, what are three things someone listening today could do to their detox routine that costs nothing? Are there three off the top of your head? I think you said a couple, but can you like just reiterate three that you think go do this today?
Um, let's see.
Not to put you on the spot.
Now I'm like thinking which ones cost like literally absolutely nothing. Well, certainly going outdoors is absolutely nothing. Moving your body is absolutely nothing. Hydrating, practically absolutely nothing in cost. But then a lot of things are just a tiny bit more. Like one thing I got into and I actually made my top 5 is mouth taping. It's just putting like a little piece of tape on your mouth. It costs like, 1 cent. Um,
Tell us
it's
a little bit about that because I've learned about that over the last few months and it's really interesting and something I've tried to be really cognizant about. So can you tell people what that is who may not know?
Yeah, it's basically just taping your mouth shut at night, which sounds scary to some people, but we really are supposed to be breathing through our nose. It just sort of makes the body work better. It's better for our oral microbiome. It doesn't dry out your throat. It's good for nitric oxide management. Um, so a lot of us are mouth breathers at night. A lot of us are mouth breathers in the day too, but night is a time you can kind of control it. As long as your nose isn't all stuffed up, you just put a piece of tape on your mouth. It's really easy to move if you're getting stuffy or anything. But it was a big needle mover for me because I think because my immunity was so wobbly, and then I was breathing with my mouth open, I didn't even know it. I would wake up with a sore throat and like chills that would last me till like 2 p.m. sometimes. And this could go on like day after day after day. So for me personally, it was game changing to find this technique. And I still do it too. I've done it like 3 years now.
No, that's great. That's one of those things look into if you haven't because got some interesting
So simple.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now for step number three, you talk about targeted symptom and system repair in your book. Can you tell us what that looks like?
Yeah, this is probably my biggest contribution, hopefully, because I've been a practitioner so long. And so, since mold can affect so many body systems, the gut and the hormones and the brain, like we talked about, the immune system, um, everybody's having different symptoms, like we talked about earlier. So, I was struggling with how to group them. I decided to just group them like 10 common symptoms. So like brain fog, is common, low energy common. So I just go into each one how you could test that system deeper if you want to, supplements and like the dosages and everything, foods to have, foods to avoid, different lifestyle tips, like different detox techniques that are especially good for, one thing or the other. So I think that's nice to be able to kind of cater to what you're going through. Um, as much as we want to get to the root cause of mold, if you're having like headaches every day or you're getting sick all the time, like you just can't, you can't really move forward and get through your day when you're just dealing with symptoms. So if you can like focus in on certain things you're dealing with, it can give you some relief as you go through the process.
That's one of the things I enjoyed about your book is when, trust me, brain fog, fatigue, you're juggling life and you really break things down like step one, step two, in like these manageable chunks because it can be very overwhelming when you're not feeling good to figure out like, what am I going to do next? So I love that you kind of break it down. So it's kind of
Oh,
easy
good.
step by step.
Yeah, and it's like you can get so many ideas online, and people are like, "This worked for me, and that worked for me," and then you just get overwhelmed, right?
Yeah. Um, but the three steps, they're great because it kind of gives you a way to think through it. Is there anything, final thoughts on kind of your, I know we kind of were just highlighting them here and there's more information in your book. Anything else you want to say about that before we move on?
I think that's good.
Okay. So now here's one of the frustrating things that I know that I see all the time and I remember experiencing. People want to go to the doctor and they want to say, run the test. I want to know if I'm impacted by mold, but there's really no single test. It's not like a pregnancy test where you go and you're
That would be
and it's
nice.
positive and yay, this is your problem. It's really it seems to be art as much as science. Maybe that's not an appropriate way to describe it, but can you talk to us about some of the common labs practitioners might run, because you hear things about urine and other things. What are they looking for when they go to a practitioner?
Yeah, so for a little perspective, some years back, I don't know, like 40 years back, when they started to, well, let me back up real far to like biblical times. Like mold has been affecting humans for a long time. We've been living with it in even primitive buildings. So there's very old references to mold. But in modern medicine, well, there was probably more with like livestock and feed. There was more research because animals can be affected by moldy food and that kind of a thing. And that's a big industry. But then with humans, I feel like it wasn't, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like 60s, 70s, 80s, that there was kind of more awareness about these biological mechanisms and studying mycotoxins and stuff. So some of the early practitioners in this field, like Richie Shoemaker, was mostly running blood tests for certain general inflammatory or immune markers that, set up in a sort of pattern where it's like, oh, well, people who have mold usually have these three things low and these two things high. And so that's what we're going to run. He also, I don't know if he developed it, but this visual acuity test, I'm personally not a fan of that test. And I never, frankly, have run any of these other blood markers because now there's a urine test you can do from home. We can talk about the pros and cons of that, but I usually just want people to do the mycotest urine test from home. There are blood tests too, but the blood tests are testing immune markers against either certain molds or certain mycotoxins. There's only one company I've seen testing against antibodies against blood mycotoxins. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty interesting because at least we're getting specifically to toxic mold. Some of the other blood mold tests are for allergies, which still could be helpful. There's a little bit of ability to test IgG, which I guess is more like current exposure to certain molds. But there are many, many molds. And I think they're sometimes suggesting common outdoor ones, sometimes common indoor ones. Like, it's a bit of a crapshoot. And it also sounds like I did some research on the blood testing. It's not always positive. It sounds like 25 to upper limit, I've seen 41% of the time when people are symptomatic and in mold, they're seeing that level of positive highs on a blood test. So it's not, I don't think, like you said, there's nothing that's like perfectly accurate. Unfortunately, the urine can be sometimes a little hard too because it's just one sample, as is the blood, but especially with urine, it's just one sample. And if you're really weak and not detoxifying, maybe you wouldn't push out anything in that urine, or maybe while you're detoxifying a month later, it would be much higher. So it does go up and down. I usually see positives. I've only once had a false negative, and there's some few things you can do to encourage a positive. I just had a practitioner tell me they run an oat test first and push detox first through different pathways and then go back and run a mycotoxin test. I had never heard that theory before, but that's what they do. So yeah, it is a little tricky and it's frustrating because most of it's not free. The only thing you can maybe get for free is if you talk to your MD or an allergist or something who's willing to do some testing for you around like mold allergies or exposure. That's possible to find that, but it's really not definitive. I mean, I think gold standard is you're seeing a positive in the home and a positive in the body. But it, in a way, like none of it's fully needed. I think it's best to have a baseline in both the body and the home. It's probably best to do a few different kinds of testing. Mm-hmm. If we had tons of money, we would do tons of testing in the home, tons of testing in the body. Most people don't have a ton of money. So we just do our best. And I feel like I got on a huge tangent there. No,
it sounds like ultimately symptoms trump testing, right? So because there's no foolproof test, and at times they may not always be accurate. Like if you're still having symptoms, or your symptoms are getting better, or your symptoms are getting worse. Can you circle back for a moment for someone listening who may not know much about the urine test? What is that looking for exactly? Can you explain that to us?
It's testing for metabolites of certain mycotoxins, and they're usually like the toxic ones in the home, which is kind of what I like. Certain tests are testing more like generally for mold load in the home. But most of the urine test is testing for mycotoxins, which is the toxins that the most dangerous mold emits. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes people will say that they can see a correlation between the mycotoxins that show up in the urine testing report and then what they find in the home. And there's, sometimes that correlation that the individual was exposed to Stachybotrys, and then the correlating, mycotoxin showed up on the urine test. So
sometimes.
Sometimes.
That's another one that people get. Yeah, that's another one people get too wound up about. And then people get wound up that the binder has to match what's on the test.
Yeah.
So that is a way to play with binders and say, oh, I definitely have this toxin. I'm going to use this binder. But again, one snapshot of urine for the whole mold that's in your home. You think you've got it all figured out? No. So you need to just assume there's probably more to the picture than you're seeing in different snapshots.
Yeah, especially I know in our experience, I have a child who's a very poor detoxer. And so some of that testing methods don't show the full picture if you were to take them as a single snapshot. So they're, I think what's frustrating to people, but in maybe a way it's hopeful that there isn't maybe one single test, but that these can serve as kind of guideposts if you're working with a practitioner that can kind of help you know, yes, we're moving in the right direction. Maybe we need to kind of pivot.
Yeah. And, sometimes, having a big break from the environment can be a test.
I love that one, by the way. That's a simple one for somebody who, especially if you're skeptical or you have a spouse who's skeptical, like take a little break from the home, go take a trip, go stay with a family member for,
maybe a long break even.
Yeah. And see.
A week might not be enough.
Yeah.
I think getting a little bit more nomadic and seeing how you feel is an option. I think you sent me a question like, well, what if you're still in it? What can you do?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
You can be nomadic, or you can camp in your yard, or you can camp on BLM land, or you can, go stay in your uncle's cabin, make sure it's not moldy. You do need to avoid the environment. If you're not ready to deal with the environment, you need to avoid the environment. And you can certainly still do foundational things like, eating well and taking your basic supplements and getting to sleep and managing stress. But I really don't recommend a whole bunch of gut testing and protocols, because if you're still in an environment, you're really not going to heal, and then you're going to have to repeat all those things.
Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of like I always give the analogy. It's like you're taking a shower and you're trying to towel dry while the water's still running. You're kind of just like running in circles a bit when you're competing with a toxic environment.
That's a good one. Yeah, exactly. I know it's one of the hardest things to do. I get it. But again, I think what you and I both, once you've lived through it, I have no skin in the game to say move out of your house. I'm just telling you it because that's what I had to do. And I think it's, Some of my remediator friends definitely say, yes, you can get your home back to perfect and all that. But it's also a huge endeavor to try to get your home back to really mold free enough that you're recovering. So yeah, I know I get that it's big, but if you can get somewhat creative in your options, and it's hard when you're sick and you're stressed to get creative in your options. And I've tried to. I'd love to collect even more of these. Maybe people at Change the Air can do. It's like, what did you do to get to a new space? Just everyone's examples, I think, would be really interesting. One of my clients, I don't see clients one on one that much, but I had one client kind of in this situation, like couldn't work, skin breakout all over, like rash, dizziness, and they had mold. And she said, well, we're going to build a home, but it will take us like another couple years. And I'm like, well, So then one of the things she mentioned, she has a big screened in back porch. And I'm like, okay, go get a new bed, not an old bed. Go just spend all your time there as much as you can. Like, I just, if that's, we'll just work with what we got. Yeah. So, my family did our version of work with what you got. And I was lucky that my ex-husband was the one who was sort of pushing me to like leave the house, test the house, like, I was sicker than him. So I just had that inertia to want to stay. But hopefully somebody in the family is like, yeah, let's do this. Like, our health is the most important thing. Let's just get the ball rolling. And I had another client who was like, well, I don't have a lot of options. I could go live with my parents, but they're so toxic, like emotionally toxic. I was like, you know what? I don't really care right now. Like, if that's the lesser of two evils, because she had stayed in this moldy apartment like 5 years. Yeah. It's like, just get moving. Just go somewhere. And then you can go somewhere else. But just get moving. I think when we're so sick and tired, we tend to just stay. So our brains aren't making great decisions.
Right. And I think they want to look for like, well, I have to move to a perfect home. And sometimes your next step just needs to be better than where you're at. Now, I want to pivot for a moment because you kind of brought it up. I always love to ask this question. What are some things that you do now? You're in a better place. Like, what are things you personally do to stay healthy when it comes to like environmental exposures? I always want to know what the pros do.
Yeah, I still do so much stuff. I think a big win from this is you're going to want to keep detoxing once you get used to it. So, like one thing I still have, I think, a bit from mold is like I got some like respiratory kind of asthma, and I've been feeling a little off. Mm-hmm. So, like literally yesterday, I did coffee enema in the morning, sauna and castor oil pack at night. I dry brushed. I definitely am outside a lot. I'm really into antioxidants. I take a lot of antioxidants. I take my basic supplements. I take digestive enzymes. Really almost never have alcohol. Don't have gluten. Yeah, and sometimes I have to tighten it up. Like now I'm like, I really think I need to go no dairy for a while because I'm kind of flared up right now. So, yeah, I do a lot of things. I meditate. It just becomes part of your lifestyle that you enjoy, at least for me, when you do it long enough.
Yeah, so it's like incorporating some of those things, like they become habit eventually, right? And making sure that, they're just part of, your day to day and everything. I love that. Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap it up? Because I know we're getting close on time here, so I want to make sure.
No, I think that's a good start.
So, okay, if people wanted to learn more or get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Yeah, I have two websites. One is just my name, which is bridgitdanner.com. Our shop is called Functional Detox Products. I have a book here, so I'll show you. The book is in 3 forms on Amazon. It looks like this. And it's nice to have, so, it is a long process, so you can kind of go back to it when you need to. We're like, what is that test she said, or whatever. And we have free resources too. We got like a free, quick start guide to mold recovery on our site. We've got ebooks about the brain and the guts. I mean, we probably have like 2,000 blogs or something crazy. So there's plenty there if you want to go down the rabbit hole. We have plenty for you.
what I found unique about your book is you actually, it's almost like two parts. You actually talk about obviously the body and the healing and that part, but you actually have a whole section on like the IEP inspection side, and you get into a little bit about remediation and like getting to a cleaner home. So I like that you kind of from start to finish cover somebody's journey. I can tell it came from someone who had walked that path themselves. So
Yeah, I felt like there wasn't quite a book that caught all areas. And I think health is sort of my stronger area than the home, but they just go like hand in glove. So it's like, how could I not talk about the home um, when we're talking about environmental illness, right? So, yeah, I hope that, I think honestly, to be honest, if someone's, definitely going through this, I think it's just a important tool to have because it does touch on so many things and the emotional aspect too, or how to organize your plan and because like you said, analysis paralysis, you can just end up like knowing or suspecting you have mold and literally doing nothing for months. So if you're like, okay, first we're gonna do this, or today I'm just gonna write down like one thing I'm gonna research today or whatever, like that's to me a really important part of getting to the finish of this.
is to take that first step, right? I love that. Bridget, thank you so much for being here. And everyone, thank you for listening. Please join us next time, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.